So one more tool set that I'd like to add to the conversation is this sprint methodology that was developed over at Google Ventures and kind of refined by Jake Knapp and team over the last, 5 to 6 years, where they talk about a 5-day sprint. The book is called Sprint: How to Solve Big Problems and Test New Ideas in Just 5 Days. And the great thing about their process, and really the book in general, is they don't just talk to you about here's why you should do these things. They give you a very clear checklist on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-day step process and all the things that you need to know to get from the beginning of an idea and get all the way through testing that idea. And beyond that, they even talk about the roles and the materials that you're going to need to be successful. Because as anyone that's done this knows, as you get into the room, there's kind of attitudes and behaviors that you want to encourage and those that you want to limit. And there's a lot of different things that you need to do to keep the energy up in the room and make sure people stay on target and on focus. And I think this book does a good job of talking about all those minor details that really enhance the experience of sprinting or designing together in a short period of time. So the sprint process, as defined in the book, really has 6 phases. There's a setting the stage phase where you're kind of getting everything set up. And then there's 5 days where they walk you through a very specific process to help you understand what you should do, when, and getting, like I said, all the way through deciding and prototyping and testing. The initial phase is all about setting the stage. So choosing a big opportunity or a big challenge is where they want you to begin. Well, here we are with our wicked problems, so we're in good shape. Then we need to determine the roles and how we're going to work together within the group. So we're going to get a couple of deciders, a couple of decision makers. We want to have a facilitator, and then of course our sprint team. And then don't forget about a few targeted experts that can really talk about the domain space, maybe the context in which we are designing. And then they really dig into, let's talk about some of the soft skill, I guess we could call it, suggestions, or the forgotten things that are going to make this experience great for you. Book time away. Don't have distractions, no devices. Those types of things should be put far, far away so you can focus on the task at hand. So day 1, they're really talking about getting purpose understood. Why are we here? Where could we be in 6 months? Really thinking about the end goal for the sprint and what you're doing this for. What's the purpose? And we're going to have outputs each day. So the output for day 1 is a map. And the map is simply a flow chart where you're listing your customers and key players, and then we're thinking about the end in mind, and we're flow charting backwards to say, how do people interact with our product or service? And just like with any good human-centered design process, we have to get the humans involved. So the way that they want you to do it to be expedient with time is to go speak with an expert. And the expert is really there to qualify your long-term goal, the questions that you've come up with, and the map that you've created. They specifically then ask you to move into the how might we process that we discussed before. And then they want a target chosen by the end of the first day. And the target is just determining your most important customer and a point on the map, somewhere where you can get hyper-focused. Day 2 of the sprint, we begin with lightning demos. And these are great. They're really just a very quick 3 to 5 minute demonstration from your team that addresses what you've determined from the day before. So you might be looking at competitors within your own space, or maybe even people outside of your existing space that have solved a similar problem in a way that might inspire your team. Day 2 is all about sketching. Sketching for any design process is an integral way to create and generate new ideas. The difference with the sprint sketch process is that they give you very particular directions on timing and the types of things that they're looking for you to sketch. So their process consists of 4 steps, like we said. It's notes, ideas, crazy eights, and then a solution sketch. And just like the process we talked about before, the 4-step sketch process is about getting divergent, getting into some exploration, and then making some decisions. So based on the morning's activities, they're suggesting that you first collect notes, then you sit down and quietly jot some ideas. You do a quick hyper storyboarding session where you create what they're calling crazy 8 notes, and then you determine one of those crazy 8s and you dive in more deeply and have a longer session where you explore and start storyboarding that idea out more thoroughly. So some of the key ideas on day 2 is working alone and working in a group. Also getting a little bit more, well, a lot more concrete on your ideas. And with a strong emphasis on, just like the Kellys were telling us, that anyone can sketch. There's no reason why you have to have a design background to sketch in a way that helps share your idea and illustrate your thinking. So now it's time to decide on day 3. They suggest some fun activities to help the team decide which ideas are the things that we need to pursue right now and which ones we're like, maybe we'll pursue that later, and then even kind of saying, that's not something that we believe we can tackle, at least within this sprint. So quickly I'll run through day 3's 5-step process for choosing some of the strongest solutions. Step 1, Art Museum. They want you to tape the solution sketches to the wall in one long row. What this does is help visualize everything so the entire team can see the breadth of the solutions that have been generated. Step 2 is a heat map, and this is simply just a dot voting exercise where each person goes and silently chooses the solutions that they like the most. Once these selections have been made, you're ready to move into step 3, which is speed critiquing. This is simply the group taking a quick 3 minutes per sketch and talking about what they're seeing. Make sure that you're capturing everything that people are saying about the sketch, especially the objections, and now you're going to have a narrowed down list with a lot of feedback from the entire team. And just like election season, step 4 is a straw poll. Each person will choose, silently, their favorite idea. And all at once, each person places a large dot sticker next to the idea that they like the most to register their vote. Up to this point, we've had a good ability to have some silent thinking, some individual contribution, and then stepping back and letting the group have some conversation to refine the ideas, to talk through some of the solutions. And then now we're at a stage where we can have a vote on the one that we individually like the most. The 5th and final step is where the decider, recall the decider is a role that we've identified earlier on. This is where the decider gets to have 3 dot votes of kind of a super vote. It's almost sounds like kind of like a super delegate vote, right? Where they're kind of putting their stamp on their 3 favorite ideas. And finally on this day, we're going to work towards a storyboard from these final selections that we've made. The method goes into pretty good detail about drawing a grid and choosing an open scene and filling out the storyboard in a very specific way to help you get to a final artifact for each one by the end of day 3. Day 4 is all about prototyping, and just like we did at the outset, we're going to need to assign some roles for the exercise. Without going into detail on the roles, we basically are breaking up the team so everyone has an assignment and that we can all work together to create the prototype on day 4. And this is going to sound familiar, but just like we talked about a little bit ago, this is where you're going to start iterating on the prototype. You're going to put things together, you're going to try them out, you're going to challenge one another, and you're going to iterate until you get to a prototype at the end of day 4 that you're satisfied with and that you feel is ready to test. Recall that Tom and David Kelly quote that striving for perfection can get in the way during the early stages of the creative process. Well, the authors of the book do a good job at making this fun. So they call it Goldilocks quality. So they want us to create a prototype with just enough quality to evoke honest reactions from our customers, right? Don't let perfect get in the way of good. We just need enough to get a reaction and to learn from that reaction. And finally, we've reached day 5 of the sprint. And in my opinion, this is where all the magic happens. This is the fun part, right? This is where people get to see how customers or potential customers are going to react to the things that we've created. The process describes what is essentially a good way to set up a well-run usability test. Everything from proper room setup to the right materials to what is probably the most important part about this, it's how to have a good interview with the customer, how to run a good task-based usability test. A usability test and running one well is all about integrity. Because what we're trying to do is get real feedback. We don't want to lead the user. We don't want to drive them into a direction. And we want to allow them to be able to experience the product or the prototype that we've created in a way that's authentic and as natural as it can be with, a video feed set up and us watching them from another room and asking them to complete these tasks that we've set out in front of them. But all that said, what we're really trying to do again is be as sincere and authentic as we possibly can to get real feedback, because the worst thing that you can do in a usability test is lead the witness, let's say, and get the answers that you want. Well, you might have won today, but really you're hurting yourself in the long term, because when this thing does get built and it goes to market, you've only done yourself and your team a disservice. So running a very strong and good testing session will pay huge dividends down the line. So during these tests, what we're really doing is taking a lot of notes. We're trying to look for the patterns that are happening. So after 2 or 3 users, we might say, that's interesting. Everyone's doing the same thing at this stage of the task. That said, one of the things we really want to be careful with is to hold judgment. We want to give all of our interviewees and our participants the ability to go through these tasks so we don't start making quick assumptions after 1 or 2 tests. We want to give the prototype the respect it deserves and let more and more people give feedback on it. Well, not too many. We don't need to really be testing with 15 or 20 or 25 people. A handful will do. 5 or 8 people will give us a good amount of feedback typically to make some good decisions. And finally, the big piece here is reviewing with your team, reflecting on what you saw. It's not an individual activity. This really is a conversation now that you're able to have with your team and to understand, hey, what did we learn and what do we need to change for the next prototype? And in a nutshell, that's the sprint planning process as advocated for by the book written by Jake Knapp and team. And what I like about the book is that they've really taken the essence of design research and design thinking and kind of distilled it down into a consumable format. So when working with stakeholders and saying, hey, we'd love to take this and try this out, what's 5 days? Most teams are going to be able to squeeze out 5 days in their schedule to follow this very targeted program with a lot of good suggestions on how to run the sprint. And I believe you're going to come out with an outcome that is going to open some eyes and turn some heads in a way that is going to allow you to do more and more of this.